Welcome everybody to In Conversation With, presented by the Council of State Archivists and focusing on contemporary issues shaping the work of state archives. My name is Ann Ackerson and I serve as the Communications and Development Coordinator for the Council. This series is made possible by a CARES grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. In recognition of this crucible moment in which humanities institutions and records repositories find themselves, the conversations in this series will span three broad topic areas: diversity and inclusion, the workplace here and now, and the future of work in the workplace. I'm joined today by Dr. Patricia Franks, Associate Professor in the School of Library and Information Science at San Jose State University, and she's also the Program Coordinator for the Master of Archives and Records Administration program there. We'll be discussing some of the trends in archival education as students and emerging professionals face the challenges of today's archives. So Pat, thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate it. And before we jump in to talking about archives education and the talent pipeline, I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your career journey and what brought you to library and information science and to coordinating San Jose State University's Archives and Records Management program.
Well, thank you for asking me to be here. I'm looking forward to our conversation today. My journey is a little different from my colleagues who came before me, not so from those who were hired after. Most of the individuals that worked in what was at the time the School of Library and Information Science at San Jose State did have a library background. However, we are now the School of Information, and we have a number of career pathways under our traditional MLIS, the Library Science program, that include things like data management and cybersecurity and just a whole host of different choices. We do a teacher education as well. So when I was applying for the position, I learned that San Jose was going to launch this Master of Archives and Records Administration program. And my background was all in business, all the way through my doctorate, which is in organization and management with an e-business concentration, actually. So I looked to records very differently from most archivists. I looked to their purpose on an ongoing basis. Why are you creating records in the first place? And how do you manage them? How do you use them? And do you have any requirements that make you keep them for the long term? And if you do, then how do you preserve them and make them available to those who need them in the future? So I was looking at it in a very pragmatic way. And I was very excited about this program because I also am a person who looks at the big picture, the large umbrella of information management, data governance. And I see that we should all understand that big picture. We should not just be a person who's qualified to teach archives or records or information governance. We should have that holistic view. And so this program allowed me to bring many of my ideas into it, but it was well formed in the first place. And so now all of our students, when I talk about our archival students, I want you to know that they have a solid foundation in records and information management and actually get credit for parts 1 through 5 of the ICRM examination. They can become certified records analysts immediately. They can apply for a case study and become a certified records manager right after that. They skip the first 5 exams. Our students are also pre-approved for the certified archivist exam because every one of the 10 courses they're required to take have been evaluated by the Institute and have been approved by the Academy, I should say. And so we also include, because things have changed and they constantly do, information governance, information assurance courses within our program. So that's the point of view I'm coming from. Is I was excited about this program. I was thrilled we could add more to it, that we could constantly make changes to keep our students and then our graduates eventually up to date with what's happening in the field.
Right, right. So can you kind of sketch for us who the next generation of archives professionals are and what they're looking for in terms of an archival career?
So I'll separate the business outlook for archives, where you might be in a corporation and you're required to maintain those records that are important to the corporation, like Coke's original recipe, which
Right,
is
yeah.
really important, and there's a purpose for it. But from the archival view, the new archivists that I see coming, you might hear the terms an activist archivist, someone who's looking at underserved populations and the neglect that they've experienced over the years and not being included in traditional archives.
Mm-hmm.
So what I see with our students that are coming out with the desire to work in archives is that they not only want a career in archives, but they want to be able to proactively change our view of what an archivist is. No longer just a keeper of the record, but somebody who, through their ability to make selections, acquisitions, descriptions, terms that are used in order to provide access, that world more broad now for everybody, more inclusive. So I'm really excited about this new generation that is looking at different ways that they can describe archives. I'm thinking of controlled vocabulary that we're used to using, right? And that even from the Library of Congress is not as inclusive as we would want, and the need to include perhaps terms from something like Homosaurus linked data vocabulary for the LGBTQ community. So this is a new generation that's not only more, I think, inclusive in their mindset, but also more global. They also now are used to working with people from all over the world.
Right.
And so they understand that their way is not the only way, and that if they need to recognize the needs of other people, they need to understand where everybody's coming from. And so their networks now are also more global in nature. It's really exciting to see their, I think, proactive stance to the work that they think they can accomplish for the common good.
Right, right. And certainly we're seeing that across really all cultural institutions, a workforce that wants to be active, that is activist and really wants to make a difference. And they're speaking up about it and becoming very activated in their opinions and, and keeping all of us older folks on our toes, that's for sure.
And I think also not just activists, but smarter in the way they're handling things. They just recognize that this is the way to do it now, right? And so in some cases, even if they're not out there on the front line saying we have to change, they're internally making changes that are going to have an impact.
Yeah, right. That's really interesting. So beyond grounding in archival practice and the technical expertise aspects of the nature of the work, what attributes and skills do graduate students and emerging professionals need to have to better prepare themselves for the challenges of today's archives?
Well, we do the job study each fall, and it's published in the spring. It'll be out in January of 2021, but we're doing data gathering right now. And of course, the traditional soft skills are being asked for: communications, organizational skills, ability to multitask, interpersonal skills. But that's not what can sell you as an applicant, I don't think, because I think everybody needs that, right? So what might set you aside from that? I think what you have to do is look even further. When somebody says communication skills, what do they mean? You know, what does that mean? And in a new book that's coming out in the spring, Tomorrow's Jobs Today, the authors mentioned that in the future, we're going to be looking at communication soft skills as something like clarity, brevity, directness, being able to get your point across without, flowery language. And I think if anybody is taking a look at some people who speak now to get their message across, they're direct and to the point when they know what they're talking about, right? And that's what our students need to understand, and what future people will do. They'll take a look at the situation and they'll try to boil it down to the salient facts and then get them across in a very clear manner. So, but there are some other things too that we bake into our program. Management skills. Archivists need leadership skills. They need to work as part of a team. They have to understand ethics. We have a course in ethics. They've got to be dependable, but at the same time creative, right? So we're asking for everything.
Right.
And and that's what you need to do, because you have to sell yourself, and so you've got to be enthusiastic about the work. You have to understand other people have their perspective that they can bring to it that could make everything work even more easily, more efficiently, and with better results.
Pat, is your program a 1 or 2 year program?
It depends on how long the students want to take, but we have never had anyone do it faster than 2 years. So 2 years would probably be the fastest. And then you can take up to 7 years if you want. Most students do it in 3 or 3.5. Because remember, we have more than 70% of our students that are working full time.
Yes, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about that in terms of, are they already in the field? Or are they in other fields and they're looking to make a new career in libraries and archives?
It's a mixture. It's a mixture, and our program, the Master of Archives and Records Administration, has no library instruction in it. Our students could not work in a library position. They could work in an archives in a library on a university campus, for example, and they do that, but they would not be qualified to work as a librarian. But those students, well, could you repeat the question?
Well, the students that typically come into your program, most of them are already working. So, so they're coming to get either a master's in their MLIS, or are they coming to get a second master's? Are they looking to change careers, or are they looking essentially to get promoted where they are? What's the motivation for?
Okay, I think what I need to clarify is our program. Master of Archives and Records Administration has no library in it, so they would not have an MLIS, nor would they want them in our program. But we do have students in our program who've already received an MLIS, very few, but some, and they say we didn't have enough archival courses in there. We need more. We need to expand on that. Our students in the MAR program, Master of Archives and Records Administration, are fully qualified as far as archives information. They don't need any more, but they do have 4 electives that they often take them from the other program. And in those cases, they may select cybersecurity, they may select preservation, they may select a programming course, depending on their own interests. So it's a little different. So when I said 71% of our students in the MAR program are working, they're usually working in their field. They may be records managers, they may be archivists. Yes, they're already working in the field, and many of them continue in that position. In some cases, they're sent by their employers saying, we need to keep up to date, and we need you to go back to school, and this would be perfect. And so they're getting encouragement to bring these new skills and ideas back to the workplace. And a lot of them are working on projects at work while they're in our classes. They're taking what they're learning right back and coming back to us again.
Which is great, which is really great that they're able to apply what they're learning immediately. And your program is entirely online, is that correct?
Yes, all of the programs in the iSchool, and we have several of them. Mine is one. They're all online, 100%. They have been since 2008. Yes.
So let's dive into a hard question here, and that is about diversity, diversity of the field and diversity of the pipeline. And we know certainly that in the state archives community, we're struggling to really diversify the field there, but I think that's probably true all across the archival profession. And I'm wondering your thoughts about diversification of the field. Do graduate programs carry extra responsibility for attracting diverse workers into the field? Who who's responsible?
I think the community is.
Uh-huh.
I was thinking about that, and I would love our program to have students from diverse backgrounds. Many of our students are in a master's program for the first time in their lives, probably more than half of them. So in that way, they may be a little diverse. But as far as if we're talking about ethnic background, that's not always the case. We can only promote the program to those who are looking at the materials that we're offering. We do go to conferences. We try to expand our network, but it's very difficult for us to do this. The one time within the MLIS program, which is the Library Information Science program, that we were able to expand it on any noticeable level was when we had an IMLS grant for a Native Americans interested in archives. And so it was, I think, a 2-year program. I think we were able to bring in 2 groups. And so it was of interest at the time, and they joined because they were getting their tuition paid. That was not sustainable. That's not continuing because the funding is not there. And I know our students apply for, and I'm always writing letters of recommendation for my students who are applying for minority scholarships, for example. But what does that do for you? It gives you $1,000, and one semester costs more than that, right? And you're only entitled to it maybe one time, or you apply again and hope you get it again, but you can't rely on that. So I don't see how a public institution like ours, where we don't have endowments like a private school, can provide any type of meaningful scholarships. We do have scholarships with the limited funds we have for new students that may cover up to 1 semester if they're fortunate enough to be selected, but we can't do it alone. And I know associations are looking at this and wondering what they can do, and they're often the ones providing those one-time scholarships, and that's wonderful. That's a gesture. It's exciting for the student who receives it, but it's not enough. We have, and I'll tie it in with business and other organizations, they also provide internships, which we can talk about later, but I think they have a role in this too, in training the future workforce, those who are going to work with information and records, and they don't often see it as just archives though, right? They see it as information, data, the whole overview. So I think we need to find a way to form a network or a collaborative of organizations and associations and educational institutions that are interested in promoting archives to come together to develop a more sustainable approach to this, one that would include funding for students to go to school wherever they want, not just our program, but wherever there's a good program, and there are many of them, but also that connection with the real world, the mentorship that the associations can provide would be fantastic. And then also placements though later on, or internship sites, right, in those organizations to expand their students' network and the mentoring. So I think we need to look at a way to form a group that could look at this on a more a holistic level and a more sustainable way to go. Even if we were looking at funding 5 or 10 students a year, can you imagine the impact that would have after several years on our field? So I know we struggle with this all the time, and we find it very difficult to find a solution.
I like that idea, Pat. And it's making me think back to a couple of years ago when we drafted our white paper. COSA drafted the white paper on attracting and retaining great talent, and which you were a great help to us in kind of crafting that message. And that white paper contains an agenda of, you know, kind of next steps. What can we do together? And it is a holistic approach. I totally agree with you that diversification of the field, whatever that may mean for an archives is really a whole community effort. It needs to, it affects all of us, from graduate programs to the professional associations, to the institutions, to the individuals. And I love that idea of seeing how we might be able to work together to kind of address some of these. They seem to be really kind of systemic problems. I know the word systemic is getting a lot of use these days, but I think it's certainly true when we're looking at diversification of our fields. How do we kind of crack that nut open and see if we can move forward with it? So I think that's a terrific thought of yours. So it sounds like we need to talk more about that at some point.
Because I was thinking, is it the chicken or the egg? Do you need more students so you can hire from? Or do we need more jobs that are looking for our students? Do we need assistance with students to be able to get through the program? There are so many different things that should be considered.
You're right. And I think that we're in a period, and I'm sure that you know a lot better than I, that we've got plenty of students coming out of these programs, but we're in a period of a contracting job market. I can tell you, I mean, it's obvious, I think, that as we make our way through this pandemic, state governments are really stretched. Their budgets are really, really stretched, and many of them are posting deficits, not only for their current fiscal years, but for several fiscal years out. And at least in the state archives community, there just aren't going to be as many jobs available as perhaps there have been, just because we're in that a really deep and long financial crunch. And I would imagine that's probably true for universities, maybe less so for corporations, I don't know. But and other types of nonprofit organizations that have archival collections that would be hiring staff. Is that kind of what you're seeing and hearing also as you're looking around the landscape and thinking about the future?
No, I have a very different outlook on the future and careers, and I think that things will always change. I think that the pandemic, while it perhaps caused quite panic in some organizations because they were not used to working remotely, made people rethink how they're working. And I think that this brings new opportunities for individuals that maybe will not be hired as a traditional archivist to sit with a collection and allow people to come in and out. Yeah. But what are we looking at now? How are you opening up that collection online to individuals? How are you reaching out in a different way? What kind of skills do you have that are important to that organization? Maybe in addition to your traditional skills, and I don't think I mean traditional because they're always changing too, as well as the theory remains the same, but the way we adapt has to change. How are we going to add value to the organization is how I think of the way our students should approach whatever job they're going for. And maybe they have to expand their horizons and be open to different kinds of positions or different titles, if you will, or a different way to join a group and say, I'm bringing the archival perspective to, you know, the IG group right now. So I'm in information governance, but my expertise is in archival science. So we're looking at generalists and specialists, right? And their specialty might be the archives, but generally, it's really information that we're hoping to capture and preserve and, you know, allow access to over time. So I don't know that I'm seeing that there are fewer jobs. I had a student this summer that was recruited and then interviewed online and offered the position and accepted, and it was all done remotely. So I think things are changing, and maybe there's a little gap while we're attempting to feel our way around how we're going to adapt. But I do think that there are many opportunities out there.
A couple of questions come to mind, and one of them is about remote work. And Is that something that you're talking about with your students, giving them skills to do that, to feel comfortable working outside of a traditional office environment? Is that something that students are asking you about too?
They're doing it with our program. Okay, since
Well, yeah, right,
2008, they
right.
have never interacted with us in public. I've met very few of them. So when
Mm-hmm.
COVID hit, some of our students said, can I have an extra day on that assignment because my workplace is going crazy and I'm the only one who knows how to do this from home. And so they were actually assisting their organization in ways to operate from home. And that doesn't just go with using Zoom. It goes with, okay, we have records in these systems locked down. How do we now provide access from home to the organization, that connection? Do we need virtual private networks? I mean, they go beyond in their training, just using the technology to understanding how the organizations use it, and even provide recommendations and work with IT to make these things happen.
Mm-hmm. And then in terms of searching for a job, I think you and I talked about this a little bit before, in terms of how a job seeker needs to position themselves, where they do need to look, how they should think outside the box of traditional archival positions or places. And you had some, I think, interesting thoughts about how job seekers need to think when they're searching for jobs.
Well, when we do our jobs report, I mean, we could give them the data. We could tell them that, you know, most of the jobs that we found actually in our last one were in archives, but some of them said archives and records. Some of them said library and had no library in it, and we're all archives. I mean, we've had just...
Yeah.
The findings are very interesting, and what they point to is the fact it's your skills and it's not your title, and it's not the title of your degree, it's what you can do. So even when I was confusing people talking about whether we have an MLIS with archival pathway or we have a MARA with no library in it, what we're really talking about is, but what can you do? What do you know? Right?
Yeah.
And it all depends on your electives, your coursework, your internship, your work experience outside. So students, I think, really have to keep themselves open to other possibilities and then find what they find is most interesting to them, but then be open even when they're looking for a career to something that they know they can do, but maybe is not their dream job. But it's a great first step. And they do need that experience. And once they get in, some people change the job within that organization. Some refocus what the duties are of the job they're in so that they're actually doing a little more of what they would like and less of what they were told they'd be doing when they first came. So, you know, I think that's where our students' creativity, their self-confidence comes into play, but also that global perspective, the ability to understand everybody else's role within the organization, strategic thinking. They've got to be able to know that the organization is there for a purpose. The organization has its own goals. It's not your goal. You can't go in there and say, well, I'm here because I want to work here. What it is I'm here because what I can do will help the organization move forward to meet their own goals. So I think that's a different mindset that people looking for a position have to go in with. I'm here, I have fantastic skills, I know exactly what I contribute to your organization to make you meet your own goals. And I think if you could think that way, you could prepare that way for any type of interview, but you need that educational background, and then you need that creativity, that flexibility, and that ability to promote yourself. We have a course every summer in addressing the job market for archivists and records managers. It's just a 1 credit, but we allow them to go in and find ways to promote themselves individually.
Do you see among your graduates, a lot of mobility in the field once they get out into the field? Or do you see that once they find, you know, the right position for them, they're going to stay there for a while? Are you seeing any trends that way in terms of?
No, I don't see any trends. I do know some that have moved into really good positions, some that have moved outside of their own area, but others that have found positions within their areas. But many of them stay where they have been working and just move into higher level positions right at work. So I can't pinpoint any one way that they would progress through their career.
You've mentioned the Archives and Records Management Jobs Analysis report that you do annually. Is that, do you collect that data annually?
Yes. Yes, we're collecting it right now, and the report will come out in the spring.
And I know when we were putting together our white paper a couple of years ago, you were really helpful in kind of providing us with some information from that report. Could you share what you're seeing in terms of, and this is in terms of the number of government jobs as opposed to those being offered in the corporate sector and other parts of the nonprofit sector, as well as the academic sector? How do government archives jobs kind of fare in the bigger pool of archival jobs and hiring?
Well, it may go down to the titles again, but when we look at those positions that had archives in the title, most were in universities. So most of them were probably within library settings. Followed closely by private organizations who have corporate archives. And then government was last. But when we take a look at those with records in the title, we see that a huge proportion are in government. And then that's followed by very small portion that would be either in private or university settings. So I find most of the individuals that, yes, are looking for positions in records probably end up working in government positions if they're applying to those positions that we're, using within our jobs analysis.
Right.
Yes, most archival positions are in university settings, I think, because they have so many libraries. In some of them, you'd think about the larger universities, right, with a library for each one of their schools, and they would have archives within those.
And I would imagine that there are more universities and colleges than there are archives institutions anyway. Right,
definitely.
And in terms of the state archives community, well, there's only one per state, so territory. So the universe is pretty small up there.
And even within that, yes, how many in each, right? That you have one archives, and then how many people that do you hire that have archives in their name or archivist? Do you have a number?
I would say that judging from the information that we collect every other year, the employment number is somewhere around 1,200 to 1,400 people, and that would include not only people who hold the title of archivist, but records managers and digital, well, those would be digital archivists or electronic records archivists as well. So it's a relatively small community when compared to some other, well, certainly when compared to the library profession, which is huge by comparison. Yeah. Any other trends from the report? I know you're putting the next report together, but anything you're seeing that would be of interest to our state archives audience?
I think most of the jobs that we're looking at, maybe 64% were archival, strictly archival. So there's still a lot of positions being advertised in comparison to those for records or for combined or even for information governance. I think we'll see a change this year in that number for information governance. It's going up by a percentage each year. So that's a little different, but most are archives. Also, most are located in on the East Coast. in the middle of the country, which means around the DC area. So we're seeing a lot of positions within government.
Right. Do you have any thoughts about salaries and benefits at all, and how, well, let me just ask you that question first. Salaries and benefits, what's the trend?
Yeah. I don't know. I was looking at one a report, I think, in the spring, and it's very difficult to say because they average out maybe 89,000 or something a year, but you're looking at all over the country. So you're looking at an average, which makes no difference when you're talking about the, the cost of living in different cities. That's or right. Out in the country. So it's really very difficult to tell. I think those people that are going into the corporate world probably fare better. And I'm saying that because they have more opportunities to get into the records management field, the information governance field, and because of compliance, new regulations, that's opening a whole new world for our people who understand, the need to protect the data, the information, the records that they're gathering. So I see higher salaries there. But if you're looking at universities, for example, well, that would be in line with whatever the faculty agreement was, because they're considered faculty. So they're going through the same process as we are. And because a majority of those positions are on universities, I wouldn't see a trend that is growing right now, of course, because of our budgetary problems.
Well, I've read some articles, a number of articles about, and heard people talk about salaries and benefits as they relate to diversification of the field. And that if any field wants to diversify itself, it's got to get its salaries and compensation packages to a point that are attractive to people. And for the most part, many organizations really struggle to do that, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about internships. You mentioned them before, and they have been traditionally a critical part of education, of an individual's education, professional development. What trends are you seeing in internships that state archives ought to be aware of?
Well, we do both physical and virtual internships. So I wouldn't say that virtual is brand new. We've been doing that since about 2013. We introduced our first virtual internships then. So that is not new. However, I think the increased emphasis on telework right now will allow those who are working in positions to understand how much they can accomplish from home, and how much they can have somebody else accomplish from their homes. And therefore, they can give some of those tasks to an intern. So I think that's going to change their mindset. And I love that, because I think there's an increased awareness of the possibility of offering internships virtually that will benefit the association. When we first started offering them, we had some difficulty with some site supervisors who didn't understand how to work with students who are remote. And so it takes retraining of the site supervisor as well. They have to become accustomed to that. So I see that. The other thing with our students is customized internships. We have a database. It's fantastic. And anybody who wants an intern can apply for an agreement, can actually sign an agreement with the university, but they fill out an application to be a site supervisor and to have a position. And that's looked at very carefully to see if those jobs are in line with what we want our students to do. And so it's quite a process. So the university agreement is separate and apart from then being approved by Dr. Linda Main, who is our associate director, and she's in charge of our internships, and she makes sure that it fits with what we would like to see our students do. And then any student who wants to take an internship for credit can look through that internship database, and you could search by virtual or physical or both. You can search on different types of positions like government or university. You could go down just through the whole list, whatever you'd like. But it's a fantastic resource. However, it's probably not the best for everybody, because what you're getting then are those positions that people want, but maybe it's not exactly what you want. So more of my students are going out and thinking about this early on in the program and saying, I would like to work in this kind of an internship. And one just had a records management position approved in a zoo. Because,
Really?
yeah, she was
Neat.
so excited because she wanted to work with zoological records. And I mean, it's quite intricate. They're not called archivists or records managers, although they're responsible for long-term and short-term records. They're registrars. So what she wanted to do was work under a registrar, and it took her probably 8 months or so to work with that zoo to come up with some type of description for an internship. To make sure that the zoo then went through their internal approval process and then through ours with that agreement with the university. And finally, last week it was posted. Now, she's the first one to apply for it, and she will get it. And she will be working in the spring for a zoo. That's going to be physical. She's going to go right to the zoo because it's near her home. That was one reason that she wanted that. But I'm seeing more of that. I had one from Canada who wanted to work in government, and she was able to work with someone who was already working a position similar to what she aspired to in order to get an internship for her. And she worked with them, and that was a remote internship. So more of our students are now saying, I'm going to see if someone will give me the internship I want. I want to work on film, or I want to work on whatever. And then they make these contacts, and then they develop that internship position. And then they have to put it through our internship database, and they apply for it, and they earn credit for it. So more of our students are doing that. And I think that's kind of exciting because it suits their needs as well as the organization. But then I also see more students now because they want first to explore opportunities, but also to have a little, a little something more than most of their peers that are graduating. They're looking for more than one internship. So I see the number and variety of internships increasing, where there's a mix of internships for credit or non-credit, and different lengths of time. I had one student move to New York City to work for 2 months with the UN because she thought that would be great experience. Then she moved back home again, and she had more trouble finding an apartment and somebody to room with than she did at the site. I just got a kick out of her, but that didn't deter her. And I have another student who had 3 internships. And he worked in Anchorage, Alaska in the museum. Actually went up there to work for one summer. And then he worked at the American Film Institute in Hollywood for another summer, and because he's interested in photography. And then he worked at UC Merced for his final internship, and only the final one was for credit. All the others were just for the experience.
Wow.
So yes, I'm seeing that interest in, physical, virtual, but also customized to suit their needs. And then exploring several options to see, do I really want to work in a museum or an archive or, a university setting? What would be best for me?
What are your thoughts about paid internships?
I worked with the internship program for several years when we were first implementing the virtual opportunities. And so I do know that there are a number of internships that are so valuable, but the organization can't afford to pay. And I would not like us just to say they have to be paid internships. I know there's a concern also, if you're paying an intern, are you replacing a person who would have had that position? So there's a concern over that as well. What we like to tell our students is that we're looking for the experience first. So if you need the credit, that's fine. You could take it for credit. If you don't, that's fine too. If it doesn't fit within the parameters of our course, that's okay. But also the pay is nice to have. You know, that's wonderful, but it shouldn't be the determining factor.
Mm-hmm.
We also try to encourage site supervisors. Say we have an intern that has to drive in for meetings once a week, even if they're working remotely. Can you help them with parking? Can you, you know, transportation? I had one student fly up from LA to San Francisco for a meeting to do a presentation on her work. Well, in that case, we expected the organization to pay for her flight, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to put her up in the hotel. So those are things that a site can do that maybe can't pay hourly wage, but can recognize the value the student's bringing in some way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of along, well, not really along the internship line, but still education speaking, attending conferences. And now, because of the pandemic, so many conferences are, well, all are virtual. And it seems to me as though it gives students particularly a lot more leeway to attend some of these meetings because they don't have the travel time or costs and that stuff involved. And I'm wondering, I'm sure you're encouraging students to kind of take as much advantage of those opportunities as possible. Do you see that your students are more active going to conferences and meetings and webinars because there's just it's so much more available because it's virtual?
Well, they have more opportunity, but they only have so much time because that's not the point. They're working and they're taking classes.
Mm-hmm.
So when they find one that fits with what they need, they will attend.
Mm-hmm.
There is, yes, you're right. It's easier to attend SAA, for example, or ARMA because it's all virtual. But I have had several students tell me they were really saddened that they're not in person because that's how they network.
Yeah.
And so there is a distance to that networking, right? And whenever there's one of those conferences, I meet with them the second day of the conference in the morning for breakfast. So we all get together, and it's one of the few times that we have a chance to see each other in person. So it's a mixed blessing, right? They have the opportunity to engage more often as far as viewing the presentations, but now they have less of an opportunity for those little sideline conversations that occur when you're walking through the hallway or you're getting coffee, right, in the back of the room. Right?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, that goes for all of us, I think. We're all missing the human face-to-face connection that conferences and meetings bring to us. That's for sure. Pat, I'd like to kind of wrap things up by asking you if, and this wasn't on the question list, so, but I don't think I'm going to throw you for a loop. And that is that if you were in a room with a group of state archivists, what would your advice to them be? In terms about, in terms about talent and attracting and retaining talent and all of that kind of stuff.
I think be open to the possibilities and be very aware of, we didn't talk a lot about the technology, but of the technology and the way it's changing work. And take a look at what the individuals that you're looking to hire can bring to your organization that can supplement what you're doing, but also bring in new ideas as well. It's easy for us, I think, when we're working to feel very comfortable in what we're doing, and we do reach out as much as possible to see the trends, to follow the trends, to look for new ideas, but we don't always have the time to get that new training. For example, one of the programs we're using is a digital repository, a commercial one online, cloud-based, and our students are trained in that. They could come in and be very valuable right from the get-go in being able to ingest items into a digital repository. They will understand your directions. They'll quickly acclimate themselves to different systems. So I think you have to be open to looking for bringing in that next generation and then appreciating them for what they're bringing to the mix so that you're all a little different and more diverse and moving forward in I think a better fashion and accomplishing much more.
Mhm.
So I don't know what else to say except that we have many talented individuals that would love to have a position within the state archives. So reach out to the universities where we have students and let them know whenever positions are available so that they can apply.
That's great. That's great advice. Pat, Franks, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been really enlightening, and I know that whoever tunes in to this particular conversation is going to get an awful lot out of it. And we appreciate all that you do for the State Archives community and the support that you've given us. And we look forward to working with you in the coming years. So thank you once again.
I look forward to working you too on the issue of diversifying our field.
Right.